We used to have really exciting Black Friday moments. Go to Walmart, they would open the door and everybody would rush in all at the same time. And it was pretty crazy. And Glacier is feeling nostalgic. And so they want to give us as much of that old school Black Friday feeling to fight for your entrance reservation.
Yeah, just to get into the park.
Exactly.
You get to go through that fun process.
Yes, exactly. It's a throwback to a simpler time.
This is the Exploring the National Parks podcast with Dirt in My Shoes. My name is Ash, and I'm a former park ranger and the founder of Dirt in My Shoes. I think that the parks are best seen from the trail, and I'm here to make national park trip planning easy.
And I'm John. I carry the kids on the trails, I tell stories, and notice all the things that Ash doesn't care about much, like rocks.
Join us as we show you around America's spectacular national parks.
We're sharing our favorite places, fun facts, adventures, and misadventures.
And we'll even throw in a little trip planning.
Let's start exploring. So, I just diagnosed a problem that we've been having in our house recently, and I don't know if you have come to the same conclusion on your own.
I don't know. Have I?
So, every time Ash buys bananas, they sit in the fruit bowl for forever until they're basically bad. Today, I think I realized why. Because I'm one of the main banana eaters in our house. The reason is because I don't want to be the first person to put a banana peel in the garbage and make it smell so bad.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, that makes no sense. I'm just really picky with my bananas. I buy them green and I eat them when they're barely not green.
Right.
And if they start getting brown spots at all, I'm done. I'm out. They taste too much like bananas at that point. So I have like a 2-day window, and sometimes I miss that window, and then I don't eat them, and then they just sit there because nobody else will. And
then I eat them when it gets close to garbage day.
Yeah.
And then I put them in the garbage can because at that point I can risk making the garbage smell bad instead of like eating a banana right after garbage day and then you don't take the garbage out for several days and you have this nasty banana peel making the whole house smell weird.
We have issues like trauma surrounding bananas.
Right.
I think we're a little weird that way. I don't think other people really think about this, but if you listened to I think it was a funny stories, but it was like the camping edition. We talked about our atomic banana experience in North Cascades National Park.
So bad.
So bad. And so I think we are just a little bit more like, I like bananas and I want to eat them, but like, wow, what a pain. They're so high maintenance.
They are the most high maintenance of fruits.
I know. I had someone tell me that I need to freeze them. I was like, I think that's true, except when I freeze them, and maybe I just need to take the peels off first, but if you freeze them with the peels on, they get all brown and stuff. And then my mentalness starts kicking in like, these are too ripe for you. You're not going to like the flavor. So,
and I know my mom listens to the podcast, and not too long ago, she just got a freeze dryer for Christmas. And so she's been on a freeze drying kick and everything's going in the freeze dryer. And they did a whole bunch of fruit. And I will say, Mom, you brought me a bunch of freeze dried bananas and I ate them all, but they were gross.
Oh, who knew we were so picky about our bananas? I know, we're so weird.
I feel like maybe we feel culturally obligated to buy bananas, but we're not willing to take the step necessary to alleviate our life of bananas.
It just feels like if we don't have bananas in the bowl, then it's time for me to go to the store again. That's kind of my indicator.
Right.
So there you go. Now you know more about us.
Yes.
And our weirdness around bananas.
Welcome to our kitchen.
Yeah.
And garbage day is Friday, so don't eat a banana before Wednesday.
Oh, man. You guys, we're jumping into glacier tips today. I'm pretty excited about this one, only because so many of you go to Glacier. A lot of you follow us for our Glacier content because it's gotten so crazy in that park over the past few years. And it's like people probably more than any other park when they find us and they're like, oh my gosh, thank you. Because it is so overwhelming to plan a trip to Glacier.
They make it so hard nowadays.
I know. This is one of the parks where we try not to be like, well, back in the good old days, when you could just show up and, but it is kind of like, it does sometimes feel like, oh man, like, are we going to have to be doing this for the rest of all time at Glacier National Park? Like, has it gotten to that point where it's just so many more people want to go there than what it can hold? And they're putting all these weird things in place to try to manage that. And truthfully, most of them suck. And so it's just like we're navigating. I mean, we're going on this will be my 4th year of helping people get Glacier reservations because Glacier does entrance reservations now. And every single year, it is significantly different, the process. And so it's like, even if you're like, okay, I got this, like, it's super complicated, but it makes sense. I got this. You go back 4 years later, it's not even the same. Not even remotely the same. Like last year, they took out, I was so mad about this. Can you tell that I have really strong feelings about Glacier?
When Ash gets upset, you can't see it, but I can. Her hands are going crazy.
I go full Italian mode. Like my hands are doing the talking. But it's like they took out the hotels and campgrounds that used to count as your reservation. And every other park that does reservations, entrance reservations, allows you to get into that area if you have a hotel or a campground reservation in that area, right? Well, last year, Glacier took out like all their hotels and campsites and stuff. Like a bunch of them don't count. But you got to read through the big long list of the 50 different options and be like, okay, this one does count. This one doesn't. This one, And it's just like, who is the one behind planning this? Because normal everyday people, especially if you've never been to Glacier, you're not going to have a clue what all the ins and outs of it are.
Right.
Because you don't have a reference point. You haven't been there. For me to read through the list and be like, okay, they're not counting Rising Sun this year, but they are counting Lake McDonald, but they're not counting Apgar, but they are counting. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like my brain has somewhere to put that because I've been to Glacier so many times that it's like, okay, I see what they're doing. Like I see the pattern. You
can categorize things and decisions and be like, okay, this is what they're doing this year,
right?
Versus what they're changing for the previous years,
right?
You can find some rhyme or reason to what they're doing, even if it's stupid. But you can see some. Can see.
I'm like, I understand what they're doing. I can see their thought process.
Right.
Do I agree with it? No. In most cases, no, I don't. And I think I've been pretty vocal about that. Somebody hire me to fix your entrance reservation system, please.
We're never going to get a ranger from Glacier to ever come on with us.
We are. I have it all lined up.
That's true.
They just
very
might
brave.
not agree with me. I know. No, it's true. I love Glacier so much. And that's why we're like so invested in helping you navigate Glacier. More than any other park. It's like, I want you to see this park.
It's magnificent.
It's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. But you got to do it right. Or it's horrible. Really is kind of one or the other, in my opinion. It's either just awesome because you're doing everything right and you're setting up yourself like for success, or you get there and it's just bad experience after bad experience after bad experience.
Which is why today's episode with all of our tips should be very helpful.
Yes, just know this is coming from a place of love. We love Glacier and we love you enough to help you with Glacier, even though I would rather pull my hair out sometimes. It can be really painful navigate this stuff.
It's worth all the work.
Yeah.
It's worth all the stress, which is why we want to help as many people as possible experience Glacier National Park.
Yeah. So let's jump in with these tips. I just want to go straight into this first one because this is by far the number one problem that people have before they ever even get to the park. It's something that just shows up in my inbox every day. People asking me how we did this and how do we fix it. And I'm trying to catch you before you make this mistake, but just know you can still make it work, but this is the number one place where people go wrong.
And it has nothing to do with what we've talked about so far.
That was just extra. That was just extra information.
That was just us venting. Thanks for being part of today's therapy with dirt in my shoes.
Gosh. Okay, glacier tip number one. The number one mistake people make is tip number one. Don't underestimate how seasonal Glacier actually is.
Oh, this is huge.
So what I mean by this is Glacier is only fully open for like 2 months.
Right.
So that's what I mean by seasonal. You're in the high mountains. You're in like the top of America. So, it's colder up there.
Top of America.
Yeah. You are. You're right next to Canada. And what a lot of people don't realize, especially even if you've planned trips to national parks before, like usually like June is a pretty safe month to plan a national park trip, right? A lot of people like to plan their trips for the summer when the kids are out of school. You're planning a trip. You're like, well, we went to Yellowstone in June last year. So, let's go to Glacier in June this year. Don't do that. Glacier is so seasonal that in fact, like us personally, if we're hoping to drive the entire Going to the Sun Road, which is the main road through the park, that's the one that takes you up into the mountains, up to Logan Pass, up to a lot of the really cool hiking trails. If you're wanting to do that, and if we personally are wanting to do that, we don't plan our trip for earlier than like mid-July.
Right. 4th of July is early for us.
It is, because the reasoning here is the Going to the Sun Road typically doesn't fully open until I've seen, usually it's around like June 20-something-ish is when they'll open that if it's been a normal snow year and they're able to get it plowed and they're able to get it open. But you just can't count on that. We've been to Glacier a million times, and sometimes we will go in June on purpose. Kind of before the road opens, or we'll kind of plan like right when the road might open. But that's because we don't need to see the whole park. That's the only time that I go in June, is if it's like, I just want to stick to this one section. I just want to do a couple things here. I'm not planning on doing all the things.
Some of my favorite pictures that we've ever gotten from Glacier is from some of our June trips.
Yeah, but I don't recommend that for a first-time visitor if you're hoping to actually experience the bulk of the park, because you are so limited if the Going to the Sun Road isn't fully open.
And even if, like, we get there and let's say we plan a June trip and they just so happen to open the Going to the Sun Road, the day after we get there. Guess what? That only means that we can drive the Going to the Sun Road. That doesn't mean that all of the things along the Going to the Sun Road are actually available to us.
Yeah, so that's the other thing, is a lot of people are like, well, the road might be open by then. I'm going to take my chances. But then the issue you run into is, especially if you're hoping to hike like the Hidden Lake Overlook or the Highline Trail, those trails that are up in those high elevations of the park up by Logan Pass, those ones are usually still closed for a couple weeks beyond when they actually open the road, because there's still so much snow on them.
Right.
And so a lot of times, like, you'll see like everybody's waiting with bated breath, like, when are they going to open the road? And it's like they'll announce the road opening date as July 1st or whatever. And then the trails don't open for a couple weeks after that. And so that's why I say usually if we're wanting to do everything, we'll go mid-July at the earliest, because by that point, it's like you probably will be able to hike the Highline Trail, or you'll probably be able to hike the Grinnell Glacier Trail or the Iceberg Lake Trail, or anything that is a longer trail in some of those higher elevations. But you go before that, and even if you go right when they open up the road, there's a good chance that you're not going to be able to hike some of those more famous trails.
Right. But then, Ash, you also don't go too late in August either.
Yes. And so this is the other part of the seasonality, right? So you have like mid-July into August. When you get into August, you can do everything, but that is when the wildfire season starts.
Right.
And so then a lot of times there are fires burning nearby or in the park even that will really obstruct your views. It makes everything hazy, you know?
Yeah, we've been there when one of the chalets burned down.
Yeah, that was so sad.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
It was sad, but also like sometimes in certain areas you couldn't really even breathe because the smoke was so bad.
Yeah.
And the way that the canyon, where the going to the Sun Road goes, the smoke, it was so funny. We did the Highline Trail this year, that same time the wildfire was going. We got there really early in the morning and on the trail really early because it was like cold. And so the smoke was like down in the valley really, really low. And as the day warmed up, the smoke like filled the whole sky.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just a really interesting thing. But if you want good pictures, if you want to breathe, if you want to have everything open, you still can't go that late after the snow melts because then you have wildfire problems.
I know. I get emails from people who are like, well, we planned our trip for the end of August. Are we screwed? And it's like unknown.
Right.
Because we've been to Glacier so many times where sometimes there's a fire like right in the park, but the smoke is blowing a different direction. And so your views are still good and you're not breathing in all the air and stuff. And there's been other times where we've been to the park where there's a wildfire all the way up in Washington.
Right.
That is just everything's blowing into Glacier and you're having a hard time breathing and seeing and stuff, And so it's too hard to know, but from us to you as friends, we really, if you haven't planned your trip already, but you're hoping to go at some point, we really do kind of stick to mid-July through early August is usually when we'll go if it really matters to us what we get to do and kind of what the conditions are in the park while we're there. When you start getting into September, like this year, for example, my gosh, they are closing down a whole bunch of their campgrounds September 1st, at least for reservations. I've been getting emails about this too. You can tell I get a lot of emails about Glacier. So they're starting to close some stuff down or they're switching it. We don't know yet. Sometimes they do construction. Sometimes they change it to first come, first serve. Sometimes it's closed completely. But what I do know is that the time of this recording, they're not letting people reserve some of these campgrounds past September 1st.
Wow.
And everybody's like, what's going on? And so when you start getting into September, that's, a lot of times they do more construction in September. They start newer projects because the visitation kind of slows down. Not a whole lot anymore. And so then you do kind of get into more closures and things like that.
Because they got to do construction sometime.
Yeah. We really have found that sweet spot for us is like mid-July to mid-August. As far as like having the ability to get to everything and hoping the snow has melted off enough that we can still hike and that the wildfires haven't come so we can still see and breathe.
Right.
It's so seasonal. And then people will ask me about, well, what about the off season? And it's like, there's not much to do. It gets a lot of snow. They close down a lot of the parks. So like winter, yeah, you can go, but it's not like Grand Teton where there's cross-country skiing everywhere and you can drive and see the mountains and, it's not that same experience. It's kind of like you're just stuck in the lower valleys.
Right.
And you don't really get all the big mountain views and like nothing's open.
Right.
So Glacier is extremely seasonal. And that's like if you only learn one thing from this podcast episode, that will serve you the best.
Right.
Before you even make your plans, to make sure you're paying attention to how seasonal Glacier actually is.
So like if you're a first-time visitor, you definitely want to pay attention to that. And you probably do want to go between that window that you detailed, mid-July, really early August. But if you're going back and you maybe just want to visit a specific park or a specific part of the park, like maybe you want to go to the east side, and you don't care to do the whole going to the Sun Road, then you can probably go late spring.
If we know that we're not going to drive the whole Going to the Sun and we just want to stay on the east side and do like the east side of the Going to the Sun road from St. Mary or to Medicine or Many Glacier, any of those sections, a lot of times we will go in June because most of those areas are open as much as they're going to be open.
Right.
You know, you get into problems like in Many Glacier if you want to hike something longer. Like a lot of times, like the Grinnell Glacier Trail isn't open because it's
still
so
way
snowy.
Too much snow.
Yeah. But we also see a lot of wildlife at that time of year.
Right.
So, and it's quieter. So it's a trade-off. If you're okay with that, if you're okay with not seeing the whole park, then we do typically like to go a little bit earlier before it gets crazy. But that leads right into tip number 2.
Right.
Which is that tip number 2, prepare for crowds. Early mornings or early evenings or both are absolutely crucial.
Right. One of my favorite things about Glacier during the summer is it's very predictable in this way. And since the days are so much longer, you can do things in the later evening that I wouldn't normally be able to do.
Yeah, because during the summer, the sun doesn't set till like 10.
That extends your adventure time dramatically.
Yeah.
Because you have such longer days. And so you don't just have to go from like 8 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You could do that, but then you can also eat dinner and go back into the park.
Yeah.
And then dodge all the people.
Well, yeah, you're right in that it's predictable. Kind of, but predictable as in every single year, I have to tell people to go earlier in the morning.
Yeah, that's true.
It's getting to the point where even early mornings are busy. And it's still like, you know, the Mario Kart racing up to the Logan Pass parking lot. And now they're having all these problems. People are just staying in the park and trying to camp in their cars in the parking lot so that they can have a spot. And it's like, you know, I had someone fighting with me about that. Well, we do that all the time. And I'm like, you're not supposed to. So whether or not they catch you, I guess, you know, you can take that chance. But they do patrol those now because it's becoming such a problem.
Right.
And so that's not really, in my mind, really a viable option, especially if you have kids. Who wants to sleep in your car?
Right. It's so bad.
So anyway, that just, you know, it's just the early mornings have gotten worse, I would say. Do not try to go anywhere really or get in to some of these parking lots in the middle of the day. And by the middle of the day, we mean like 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. probably. Yeah. You really, there's not a lot you can control as far as the crowds are concerned. But the things you can control is like when you go through the entrance stations and which parking lots you try to get parking in first and like what times of day you're trying to go to these places. That's what the Glacier itinerary really does really well, is like help you know, okay, like we need to go here first. And then once everything is full, after we do that first thing, like where do we go next? Or how do we make this work next?
Right.
You know, because your whole day really is going to be just like crowds.
Well, yeah. And that's one of the things that I love about the itinerary is that it helps you prioritize places based on how busy they get first thing in the morning. And then middle of the day, which places aren't quite as busy. And so if you've never been there before, you have no idea of knowing.
And if you just follow what most people do, you know, is like kind of stop as you go along the Going to the Sun road, then you're going to be screwed because you're just basically following a parade of cars through every stop. And all of you are trying to get parking at the same time. And so that part of it is like such a crucial part of just like knowing, okay, here's our first stop, and then we're going to do this, and then what do we do after now that all the parking lots are full?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And so that you're right. Like that's what the itinerary does really well. I sit and watch parking lots when we go to Glacier. That's what my last few trips to Glacier have been. It's like I'm in the park all day. I'm not even hiking or anything. I'm just like going from parking lot to parking lot and paying attention and making notes of like what it looks like.
Right. So I feel like the main point, the reason for this tip is to let people know if you're going to a Glacier vacation this year, don't expect to wake up and have a leisurely morning, eat breakfast, and then go into the park and have everything be hunky-dory.
No, like
It
you
won't
have to
be.
get up before the sun.
Yes.
You're driving in the dark if you're getting in the park, or no parking
Yeah,
for the
exactly.
rest of the day, basically. Now, one thing that we have started doing to kind of help with the crowding, and we mentioned this before, where we will, a lot of times, like we'll go in early morning and we'll get in there before just like everything gets super crazy. And then we'll do our stuff. And then a lot of times we'll like go either to like a more off the beaten path place, or we'll go and swim in the lake or something, you know, or go eat at a restaurant or something kind of in those middle of the day hours. And then a lot of times we'll go back in kind of around like 4:30 or 5-ish. You don't want to go back in right when they let all the people who didn't get entrance reservations
Right.
go in. And that changes from year to year, that timing. Like I said, they're always changing their minds on that. Don't try to go in right then, because the lines will be long for all these people who couldn't go in earlier in the day. But you wait a little bit longer, kind of getting more into the dinner time hour. And we seriously, like last year, we drove up to Logan Pass. We saw mountain goats and bighorn sheep, like on the way. The parking lot only was maybe a fourth the way full. And we still had time to go hike to the Hidden Lake Overlook Trail. Like,
it was awesome.
Yeah.
It was so pretty,
It
too.
was so pretty. The wildlife was there.
The sun isn't directly over your head, and you get some really cool lighting and some shading on the mountains, and it's just gorgeous.
And like we said, the sun doesn't usually go down till around 10 or so in the summer. And so you get a good 4 to 5 hours in the evenings after everybody has left and while people are eating dinner, and you can do some of the smaller things at that time.
Right.
We do that for Mini Glacier too. We go in at dinner time, and then we'll go and we'll do some hiking. We'll go see the moose at the lake and, you know, all the stuff. It's a good alternative. Unless you're like wanting to do something really long, like the Highline Trail, like you don't want to save that for 5 o'clock at night, right? You're not going to get very far before you're in the dark.
Right.
But for some of those smaller things, that works really well too.
Now, moving on to tip number 3. Tip number 3 is book your lodging in advance, because lodging in Glacier is so competitive.
And we should add an asterisk to that, not just in advance, but 13 months in advance.
I know, so ridiculously far in advance. If you're going to stay in one of these lodges, you have to know more than a year in advance.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but that's just where we're at.
I remember the first time, this was before we had ever gone to Glacier, I saw a photo of the Mini Glacier Hotel, and I was like, oh my gosh, that place looks amazing. So cool. And we were planning our trip to Glacier, and it was probably September, and we were hoping to go the next August. And so I got on there and I was like, I really want to stay in that hotel. And to my surprise, it's all booked up. And like, this was like 10 years ago. Now it's like, well, yeah, of course it was booked up. You know, we know better. But like 10 years ago, it was even that competitive. Where it's like, oh my gosh, like it's 12 months in advance almost. And we still can't get a room in here. It was crazy.
I know. It was wild. It's still so wild, and it will forever be wild.
Yeah, it's just getting worse. We did get some last minute reservations last summer. We were able to stay at Rising Sun and the Mini Glacier Hotel just really last minute, and we were super flexible with our dates. We're like, we'll just take what we can get.
One night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that can happen sometimes. You know, you can get cancellations and stuff. But generally, if you're wanting to stay in the park in one of the lodges, it is 13 months in advance.
Yeah.
So I mean, you just got to be so on top of it. It's like you might not be thinking about going to Glacier this summer, but you might be thinking next summer. And it's like, it's time to make reservations now almost for next summer.
But in a lot of ways, if you can plan ahead and do this, it's so worth it, because the commute time into the park from some of these lodges is significant. And so it can allow you a little bit of a head start on a lot of people if you want to get parking spots at some of these parking lots that we've talked about.
Yeah, well, it's like if you stay at, like, we stayed at Rising Sun, just in one of their little cabins, and it's nothing fancy, but we're 15 minutes from Logan Pass.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, instead of getting up at 4 a.m., we could sleep in an extra hour and get up in there and get parking, And so you kind of have to balance that. But yeah, the lodges are typically 13 months in advance. Your campgrounds are still 6 months in advance as of right now. Again, like, they've kind of been changing stuff around and the dates have been weird. But the camping, I get a lot of questions about too, because it's so competitive. And I'll just give you one little tip here. And there's like tips within tips within tips. I'm just realizing.
Tip 3A.
What I always do if I'm planning on camping in Glacier is I will first book refundable campsites outside of the park, like the year in advance. But I want them to be refundable. But what I don't want to do is wait for the 6 months in advance when they open the park campsites, not get them, because it's the most anxiety-inducing, stressful process to try to get these, not get them, and then not have any other alternatives. Right? And so I'll book the ones on the outside of the park a year in advance, and then I'll wait for them to open the ones in the park, try to get those ones. If I do get those ones, then I'll cancel my other ones. But if I don't get those ones, then I'm not like hanging out to dry. I actually still have something that I can do.
You still get to go to Glacier.
Yeah, I still have a reservation at a good location.
You know what I think this is all about? I think back when I was growing up and I was a kid, we used to have like really exciting Black Friday moments, where you'd go to Walmart or go to Target, they would open the door and everybody would rush in all at the same time. And it was pretty crazy.
Yeah. And we all love that.
Yes. So much fun. As time has gone on, they've kind of gotten rid of that. And Glacier is feeling nostalgic. And so they want to give us as much of that old school Black Friday feeling as often as possible. That's why their lodges go so fast. That's why their campgrounds go so fast. And they even want to give you the opportunity to fight for your entrance reservation.
Yeah, just to get into the park.
Exactly.
You get to go through that fun process.
Yes, exactly. It's a throwback to a simpler time.
It has gotten so competitive. If you need help with entrance reservations, by the way, we help on YouTube. There's a video that kind of walks you through what those are. And then even more so with the Glacier itinerary, I have another video that actually like shows you how to get one.
Right.
And
exactly.
I'm sweating bullets in that one, always wondering if I'm going to get the reservation while I'm recording it for everyone else. Anyway, so that's somewhere to help too.
Yes.
Okay, let's jump to tip number 4. So tip number 4 is to familiarize yourself with the park's layout and logistics before you go.
Right.
And the reason that you're going to want to do this is because just as much as you can learn beforehand and, the clearer idea of what the park actually is before you go, the easier it will be to make those plans that you need to make so that you're not stuck in the crowds.
Right.
And stuff. And so, for example, like if you look at the map of Glacier, and this always happens when you go to a new place, right? You look at a map and you're like, okay, I can see where everything is, but like you don't know what the landscape is, or you get to the park and you're like, oh, that's not what I was expecting.
Right. Exactly. How could you know though?
And Glacier is exactly like that, where when you're looking at the map and if you're looking at the going to the Sun Road, you're like, okay, it's 32 miles from Apgar to Logan Pass. And so you're writing down your schedule and you're like, okay, 32 miles, we're driving 40 miles an hour or whatever. We should be there pretty fast.
Or
right?
if you're thinking like in just regular highway terms, you're like 32 miles, going 65. I'll be there in half an hour.
Well, yeah, but you don't drive 65 in the parks.
Yeah, but you don't know that unless you plan ahead. Do a little bit of research.
So 32 miles from Apgar to Logan Pass, you're like, okay, I could probably do that in 45 minutes or so. In reality, it typically takes 1.5 to 2 hours to drive that section. And so just any research you can do before you go. And I know, like I said, it's hard to like look at a map and be like, okay, I get this. But that's why I've started making YouTube videos trying to walk people through all of this trip planning stuff.
Yeah.
And I show you my screen and I show you on the map. And, it's like, because that gives you such an advantage when you actually get there. If you already kind of know, okay, if we want to be to Logan Pass by this time, we need to leave way earlier probably than you're thinking to get up there, even though it's not a lot mileage-wise.
Right.
The other way that this plays in a really big way, is really familiarizing yourself with the layout of the park so that you don't book your lodging in the wrong places.
Right.
Because a lot of people, if they're not familiar with Glacier, you might look at a map and say, okay, here's Glacier National Park. A lot of people stay in Kalispell or Whitefish to go see Glacier National Park. And I'm just like, no, don't do that, and so many people do. And can you make it work? Yes. But you're adding an extra 45 minutes to your drive in the morning to get into the park where it's already so competitive to get parking. And it's like you need every single minute you can give yourself to get up to those parking lots. And so to stay all the way out in Kalispell, even though it's not that far, you need that time to be in the park.
In normal world terms, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But this isn't normal world at Glacier National Park. It really has gotten crazy.
When we book our lodging now, we rarely stay in one place for the whole time. Because for this park, it just does not usually make sense to do that.
Yeah.
Because that timing, like getting into the park and getting to the parking lots, is so critical to split up your lodging so that you can get yourself closer to all the places. Makes a huge difference. And like I said, like we're not leaving you alone in this, but it is really important that you're not just like, okay, lots of people stay in Kalispell, so let's do that. And, let's just see how we feel in the morning as to if we're going to be able to get up and go do that, or...
That just sounds so ridiculous to me right now, knowing that we know.
You can't see how you feel in the morning. You just have to push through it.
Yes, exactly. Well, kind of combining a couple of the tips, and you've gotten emails like this before where people didn't necessarily realize, oh, okay, this is a seasonal place, and then also didn't realize the park's layout and things like that. And so you've had people that have stayed far on the west side of the park during the late spring when the Going to the Sun Road wasn't open. And so if they wanted to do anything, they had to drive all the way around the bottom of the park, hours and hours, to get to any of the things on the east side.
They'll be like, so we booked our lodging in Kalispell, but we want to go to Many Glacier, which I'm like, that's literally like the furthest apart you can get. It's like, okay, I can't fix that for you because your reality is you're going to be driving 4 hours each way to get up there, and it's like, even if the Going to the Sun Road is open, maybe it's only 3 hours each way then, and like I said, like just planning that lodging and looking at the map and saying every minute here counts. And so the closer I can stay to the park, the better off I am.
Right.
And if I want to see both the west and the east sides, I'm better off booking something on the west side for a couple nights and then booking something on the east side for a couple nights.
Right.
That's really important. And like I said, we're not leaving you to do this by yourself because I have a full video on YouTube that walks you through glacier trip planning. If you're just sitting here going, this sounds horrible. I've had lots of people who are like, well, you're convincing me not to go to Glacier. It's like, I know it's not my point. I don't want you to not go, but I don't want you to go and not know these things. That's even worse.
What we've had happen so many times is people email you or contact us and say, I had the worst experience at Yellowstone, or I had the worst experience at Zion, or I had the worst experience at this park or that park or Glacier. When really all we want to do is to make sure that you know what you need to know in order to have the best experience possible, because these locations are epic. Glacier National Park, I have some of the best memories I have with family are at Glacier National Park.
And we go to Glacier National Park out of our own free will and choice for fun almost every year.
Yeah.
So we're not dissuaded by all of this, but we know what to expect. And you make different decisions when you know what to expect.
Right.
You can fix a lot of the problems before you even get there if you know better what to expect.
Right.
So the whole point of this is not to be like, don't go, because we still go and love it. But it's just, we just want to make sure you know what's going to happen, what the realities of this park are. But like I was saying, if this just feels like, oh my gosh, like I don't even want to navigate this, then go get the Glacier itinerary off of Dirt in My Shoes, because that has helped thousands of people have an actually really great time in Glacier.
And saves you hours of planning, which we're telling you to prepare a lot.
But you don't really have to do that if you have the itinerary. That's the whole point.
Exactly.
If you want to bypass all of this, like I tell you, you know, this night you'll want to stay here. This night you'll want to be here. This day you're going to want to go here first and then do this. All of that's there. So,
and we have all of this information. Like a lot of it's on our podcast. We have a lot of it on our YouTube. We want to provide people with everything that they can to, if they want to plan their own trip, we want to give you everything you need so you have all the information. But we have the itinerary if you just want everything ready to go.
Yeah. So let's jump into tip number 5. And this one's a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
we gotta lighten it up a little bit. We know that. And so tip number 5 for Glacier National Park is to take advantage of Glacier's world-class mountain hiking trails.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this place is incredible.
Just doesn't get better.
It's so good. We've done polls, I think, on our Facebook and Instagram before. Like, would you rather hike here or here? Or like hike here or here? Or do this trail or do this trail? And consistently, Glacier wins everything.
Yeah, because it's just so phenomenal. And the thing that I love about Glacier is that they have good trails for you regardless of your hiking ability. So it's like, it's not like to get some of these huge mountain views. Like you don't have to hike for miles and miles and miles to do that.
Right.
Because the Going to the Sun Road takes you straight up into the mountains.
Yeah.
You know? And so I'll tell people like the Highline Trail is like 12 miles long. And a lot of people don't want to hike that far. And it's like, you seriously only have to leave the parking lot and start walking on this trail for 30 seconds and it's like, boom.
Yeah.
You know? It's amazing.
It's so cool.
And so I think for Glacier, like if you are not used to hiking in the mountains or it's a new landscape for you or it feels intimidating to you, Glacier just has so many good trails that don't require you to be an expert in mountain hiking.
It's true. Well, the Highline Trail specifically, for the most part, a lot of it is flat.
Yeah.
And so it's like the most accessible 12-mile trail in an alpine environment that you can ever have. You don't have to gain thousands and thousands of feet of elevation to get all the way up there in the first place. If you want that experience, you'll find it in Glacier. Like you can go to Mini Glacier, you can do Grinnell Glacier, you can do Iceberg Lake, you can do tons of things, go up to Swift Current Pass. There's tons of things you can do in the area to have bottom to top experiences. But so much of this park is just catered to giving you almost instant access to amazing mountain environments.
That's true too, because those trails that you just listed are some of the harder ones in the park. And so if you're really into hiking and that's something you love to do, there's a million trails for you to push yourself on.
Right.
Do that. In that same area, the same Mini Glacier area, you can sit on the back deck of the hotel.
Yeah.
And be surrounded by mountains and see wildlife. And you know what I mean? Or you can also take a boat across one of the lakes and then do a shorter trail from there to the Grinnell Lake area, which is gorgeous. And that trail is really fun. And, you know, and so it's just like, no matter what you can do or feel comfortable doing, like there's beautiful mountain landscapes waiting for you in that park.
There is an adventure for you at Glacier, no matter your abilities. And it's so awesome.
Yeah. So I always tell people, you know what, plan on doing some hiking while you're here. Plan on starting some trails, even if you don't want to finish them.
Yeah.
And I think that also is kind of what the itinerary does really well is like, well, at least start this one. and go for an hour
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. You don't have to like complete the trail to see the beautiful stuff,
Right.
which sometimes you do in some places,
Mm-hmm.
but Glacier is a lot less like that because it's just like you're surrounded around every turn.
Yeah.
There's lakes that you can drive to, beautiful mountain lakes that you'll just pass by as you drive.
I know.
And there's boats you can take, and there's bike paths you can ride on, and there's scenic drives, and there's just so much you can do to immerse yourself in this mountain landscape.
Right. It's the Rivendell of Montana. There's so much here.
So that's our final tip for this episode, is just plan on hiking, because the mountain landscapes are so good
Yeah.
in this park. And it does, as John mentioned, it really does make it all more worth it to go through all the rest of the stuff that you have to go through to get here. And it's like you get to Glacier and you see your first bear, or you see those high mountain peaks, or you sit on the lake shore and you're just like, man,
It's so rewarding.
it's so amazing
Yeah.
to be sitting there. So it's absolutely worth the effort, which is why we keep putting out Glacier content as much as we can to still encourage you really to get there. But if you do need help with that, again, go to Dirt in My Shoes. We've got a ton of articles, free articles about planning your trip to Glacier. You'll find the Glacier itinerary there if you want me to lead you through what I would do while I was there and help you take care of everything. Or go over to YouTube and watch our Glacier videos over there, where we'll help you with trip planning and entrance reservations and all that stuff. But just know that we have your back, because this park is incredibly special and we can't wait for you to visit.
So those are our tips. But we also know that the Dirt in My Shoes community is a wealth of knowledge. There are so many people that are well-traveled, that have been here. We want to open it up and provide an opportunity for the community to get together and share some more information too. And so if you want to head over to the Facebook or Instagram pages for Dirt in My Shoes, we'll have a post there where we want to ask the Dirt in My Shoes community, if you have a tip that you think we missed, please share it, because we're all about helping each other enjoy Glacier National Park here.
And if you've enjoyed our podcast, thank you so much for listening. Please go give us 5 stars on whatever platform you're using. We read through all of those reviews. We greatly appreciate them, and just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. And we hope that you're able to get some dirt in your shoes.